Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm thrilled to be here with you guys. I hope that you're doing well. I know many of us are traveling. There are many conferences taking place. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in North Dakota sooner than later. But before we break out into our session, I want to first give you a couple of announcements. First things first, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. It will be featured on the X Factor EDU network hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph and the Tribe. Thank you, Dr. Matthew, for being amazing and for all of the leaders that you have been supporting. With that said, I also wanted to remind you guys that whenever you get a chance to please follow me on social media. You can find me on Facebook at Miss India White. LinkedIn is the India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White. And I also want to thank you guys in advance because I am traveling, and so I am aware that there will be different announcements as we are recording, but it's all good. I also want to do that whenever you get a chance to check out my website, www.india-white.com, for blogs, books, and to schedule me for your next speaking or coaching event so I can be in the trenches with all of you. Thank you to those that have been doing this. I'm super excited. I cannot wait to mingle with you guys and to work with you on different events where we're closing the achievement gap and we're talking about equitable practices together. Now, I also wanted to remind you guys of the workshop that I have on the Grassroots Workshops website. Please check that out whenever you get a chance. It's the new Grit Mini Workshop. It's been launched. It's titled How to Harness Grit to Help Students Thrive. So with that said, go ahead, go over there, grassrootsworkshops.com, and check out the amazing workshops, including my Grit Mini Workshop that's on that website. I also wanted to just transition out and talk with you about grit, and we're going to talk about why grit even matters. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I really just want everyone to understand that this is not just a cliche or just some word that we use just because it's a fad. It is a way of life. It is a trait, and we deserve to learn about what it really is and how it really impacts students and what education says about it. So I've done some digging, and there's some things that I'm going to provide for you guys as we go through the show today. So the topic of our show today is going to be why grit matters. So I'm going to now share with you some really cool things that I found regarding grit. So first things first is I want to share this article I found on grit, and it talks about how it's the secret ingredient for success. And so this is written by Paula Davis. And so she says it's the importance of having passion and perseverance to achieve your goals. So she says, I first learned about grit many years ago when I competed at our district's annual music contest as a fifth grader. I played the clarinet and I was going to perform a solo. The day my performance arrived, I sat in the front room filled with people. The judge cued at me. I blew into my clarinet, nothing but air. I tried again, and this time it was an awful honking sound that emerged. And I think for us reed players, us wind players, we totally get that. She says her face was bright red. She realized that her reed cracked and she didn't have a spare. So he told her she could come back or she could try again. So we've got all this really cool stuff happening here. So long story short, let's keep following her story. She says, in a less dramatic fashion, my dad and band director helped me get new reeds. They both encouraged me to return to the scene of the crime and try again, which I did. This time the room was empty except for my parents. I played the piece flawlessly and ended up with the first place medal. That is nice. See, she persisted. It says, more importantly, the judges shook my hand, told me how proud he was of me for having the courage to return and play again. My parents gave me a great gift that day. They let me sit with and process the embarrassment and other emotions I was feeling. Okay, so then she's talking, and now she's going to keep going here. She says, succeeding at the music contest was an important goal of mine, and I had practiced for hours and was excited to play. Years later, I learned that this trait had a name, grit. Grit is having both the passion and perseverance to achieve a goal, and grit often predicts who achieves the highest levels of success in school and at work. So now she's talking about Duckworth's research. So she says here, gritty students tend to outperform their less gritty peers, and grit scores are associated with higher GPAs. Again, so gritty students tend to outperform their less gritty peers, and grit scores are associated with higher GPAs. So we've got to figure this out, right? So it's obviously is a compartment to closing the achievement gap and helping students. So she says here, as we keep reading, in one study, grit was a more accurate predictor of whether an incoming cadet could finish all his or her first summer basic training at West Point, more so, in fact, than self-control, academic GPA, military performance score, and even West Point's own whole candidate score. Now, that's pretty powerful if she found that from West Point, which are like some of the top, cadets and leaders in the nation. Look here. So as we keep reading, she says, Grit also predicted those students who would advance into later rounds of the Scripps National Spelling Bee. So it's all about grit, it looks like. So then she says here, more recently, grit has been shown to predict the success of women lawyers across the country's largest law firms. Okay, and that was found by Hogan 2013. This is a big finding in the legal profession because for years, men and women have been entering law schools and law firms as first-year associates in roughly equal numbers. Yet, so when they're concluding here, it says, as of 2013, the number of female equity partners was about 17%. American Bar Association Commission on Women Profession created a grit project to educate women lawyers behind the science behind grit. So now she's going to talk with us about how do we just look at grit in the aspect and the lens of being a successful person in your career or just in general. So here's some theories that she has. She says, first things first, make it okay to fail. And I think this is huge because there's so much pressure sometimes to be perfect and, to do everything right. So that whenever you do have that acceptance, that failure is simply a part of your journey and it's not the end all be all, then I think that does help. So let's keep looking. So first things first, it says, make it okay to fail. And we definitely need to do that definitely with students and, letting students know that it's not the end. They can continue to persist and make something great even after failure, right? So let's keep going. It says people with growth mindsets feel that ability can be developed through hard work and learning, and they see failure as an inevitable result of trying new things. Again, people with growth mindsets feel that ability can be developed through hard work and learning, and they see failure as an inevitable result of trying new things. And so as a result, people with a growth mindset try new challenges, they take on good risks, and they use effort as a path to mastering something. Okay, so seems like it really is cultivated through having a growth mindset as well. So now let's look at the next point. Let's look at the next point that she said to us. She says also talk about grit. And I think this is where we are kind of just as a whole. We're talking more about it. So it says talk with your kids and employees about what grit is and how it leverages success. Share examples from your own life about times that you've been gritty. Emphasize that failure is going to happen during pursuit of tough long-term goals and discuss what plan B or even plan C looks like. See, the recipe for success is about much more than smarts. Grit is a powerful trait to cultivate in those you lead and teach. And it's worth focusing on as early as possible in your career. I believe that to be true as well. So I think this is huge. I think having those conversations about grit, just explaining, okay, this is what grit is, and this is how, you can build grit. This is how, when you hit a low in life, this is how you bounce back through grit. This is grit, having great resilience in time. This is what that's all about. So I think it's great that they were, speaking to us about that because it's a lot that we can take from that. Now let's keep moving forward. I wanted to know about the role of grit in students and their academic success. So I did find this actual journal article feature here from the National Library of Medicine. And so it's titled The Role of Grit on Students' Academic Successes and Experiential Learning Context. And so this is by, it looks like Jiazi Li and Yang Li. And so this was published in 2021. And so their abstract, they're saying that students' success as a cognitive issue in learning is prejudiced by proper learning approaches, which improve their comprehension and achievement, but in an attempt to scrutinize supplementary alternative variables, right, that envisioned student successes, the researcher inspected a non-cognitive factor, namely grit, theorized as passion and perseverance due to its long-term quality on the one hand and its popularity among scholars, right, on the other hand. And so, long story short, it's talking about experiential learning, which they label here as EL, and how it's a momentous instructional approach that you can use in educational process to accelerate the do it and learn. And so, with that said, I want to scroll down to when she really starts breaking down grit for us. And so, she talks about experiential learning right here. This is the actual like scholarly article, so you're gonna have to do your digging on there. Grit. So here she's talking about grit. So it says grit has been introduced as a distinctive feature noticeable in successful learners, and its conception that should be regarded as both social and emotional, and certain attention is to be paid to its concerning one's success in life. Again, certain attention is paid to its concerning one's success in life. And so it talks about how grit impacts mentalities and practices across various settings. Okay, and it's shared by most exceptional innovators in each field. Let's keep going. It says grit can be characterized as the enthusiasm and determination to achieve long haul objectives, despite difficulties and afflictions. So again, it can be characterized as enthusiasm and determination to achieve long haul objectives, despite difficulties and afflictions. And it can be dynamic personality strength for the occasions when people experience their own difficulties and concerns, or when they experience crucial circumstances. So that was found by Lozano Jimenez et al. In 2021. And so look here, it says grit, it generally and incorporates the ability to sustain both the interest and exertion in projects that can require some to finish. And those that do not steer from their original objectives, they have a higher level of grit. So it, in essence, it's saying grit can be regarded as the follow through or the intentional, persistent devotion to exercises and obligations experienced to accomplish one's objectives effectively. Again, it could be regarded as the follow through or the intentional, persistent devotion to exercises and obligations experienced to accomplish one's objectives effectively. Okay, so it looks like there's something here. And then concluding here, it says a successful person with added perseverance is not only extremely motivated, but also eager to concentrate on fulfilling long-term, more ambitious goals, as well as being adaptive and less concerned with daily routines. So that was a mouthful, but it showed us the truth of what grit really is and how it really operates. And one thing I liked about it is how it says that, it's like fully intentional, well thought through, well planned, and you're focusing on your long-term goals. I think that, where some people go astray is they stop focusing on those long-term goals, and or they might obtain, like I met someone and they said, and during my travels, and they said, I achieved all of my goals that I had on my bucket list. And then it's like, what's next? What's left? It's almost like they felt like there was no more purpose in life. So I think the key here is to make sure that we keep a bucket list and that we keep challenging ourselves and challenging our grit levels. And I love how people get involved in marathons and things like that. Like they continue to, challenge themselves and say, okay, I'm going to work out. I'm going to, you know, lift this many more weights and do all these different things, you know what I mean? Because they're really gritty and they're really trying to accomplish these goals. So I think that that's really imperative for what we're trying to do here. And as we're trying to build grit in students, we have to have those conversations. How are we building grit levels in our students? And so, with that said, I thought, you know what? Well, then we're talking a lot about grit. But what is the opposite of grit, right? So I'm like, if grit doesn't matter, like, does it really matter? And if it matters, what's the opposite of it? Like, I mean, if let's look at it. Let's see. So I was able to do some digging, and I found, I just want to pull it up for you, some synonyms and antonyms and all that good kind of stuff. So but this is word hippo, and so this I asked word hippo about grit. What is the opposite of grit? And so I don't want to talk about grit like loose particles of stone. I want us to go to this part here, the noun. And so it says the opposite of courage, determination, or vigor in the face of danger or difficulty. So the opposite of grit, spinelessness, weakness, cowardice, idleness, lethargy, timidity, indecision, indolence, irresolution, apathy, which unfortunately we've seen some of these traits in students and in those that have even been burned out. Questions, fear, indifference, um, flexibility. And I think flexibility in the sense that you're not convinced on one specific goal. So you're always vacillating, if that makes sense. Oh, see, vacillation right here. So, let's keep going. Powerlessness, intolerance. Wow. Irresoluteness, indecisiveness, hesitation, unimportance, disapproval, bias, bigotry, narrow mindedness. I think that's very interesting. Wow. And then it says inactivity and even leniency and aimlessness. Look at that. And then let's keep going. The opposite of one's willpower or ability to control themselves. So let's look at that. So the opposite of grit in this regard, when it talks about willpower, self-indulgence, intemperance, immoderation, right? Excessiveness, overindulgence, gluttony, greed, excess, dissoluteness, wantonness, insobriety, extravagance. This is a lot. Lack of control, self-gratification, and like all these wantonness, to abandon. I think that's very interesting. But it's talking about the opposite of grit in when it comes down to the aspect of building willpower. Okay, so we see here, and then here, opposite of the emotional or mental qualities necessary in dealing with difficult or distressing situations. So that's if somebody has vulnerableness, if they're weakness, liability, inaptitude, hypersensitivity, uh, oversensitivity. Very interesting. So as you can see here, these are some opposite words when it comes down to what is grit. What are we focusing on? Why do we need grit? Why does grit matter? Well, if you don't have grit, according to the opposite of it, then that means that you might deal with, lethargy. You might have helplessness. Um, might be very vulnerable. Might not have willpower. Um, it might affect your ability to make a decision and to get some things done. And so I think that we have to really have a heart to heart regarding how are we getting things done and how are we helping students to also be better decision makers. So with that said, I thought that was very interesting when it came down to discussing why grit matters. And I think all of us know that grit matters. And I think that, the area of focus is not just understanding that it matters, but understanding how it works and how to also create that buy-in for our students to let students know that it matters. And I'll tell you this, I was talking to someone recently as I was traveling here, and they were talking about how, in their career, getting started with their career and working out, doing things like that, how at first things like starting a new career might be uncomfortable, starting a workout plan might be uncomfortable. However, when you get into the rhythm of it, things start to line up and things start to flow. And I think that that's the thing with students is, when students are coming to the table with trauma, uh, baggage from years before, years behind in their work and academics, they need some type of restorative plan, and that can happen through grit. They need to be recalibrated. They need to be restored and reset, and that happens as we continue to help build their grit levels and to encourage them and to motivate them, to let them know, hey, this is a new year, this is a new start. And so I hope that we can remember that as we're walking in the new year, that, we are the catalyst for change in a great way in our classrooms. This is not just cliche, this is really the truth. But I think that, it's going to take grit, and it's going to take a lot of work on our part as educators, because change really happens when you start doing things that are different and you put out more than you desire to put out and you remain gritty. And when you lead by example as an educator, then students have to follow you. They have to follow your guidelines, and they have to follow the norms and the standard of excellence that you've established in your classroom. I can say that, in my experience when I was math coaching and when I was teaching, my kids knew I was far from lazy. I came in early and I left late. I stayed on my feet. I made sure that I walked around, checked for understanding. I made sure that I communicated with parents, so much so that sometimes parents were like, you don't have to tell me all, this stuff anymore. And kudos to all you rock stars out there that do the same thing. I kept a diary, like a journal for, what was happening in my classroom, the strides that my students were making, strides that I was making in my own professional development. And I think that is where every educator needs to really invest and look into, because we have to remain truthful. We have to remain at face value and honest with the not only the potential, but with the gains and with what you're really starting to accomplish in your classroom. Okay. Again, you have to remain truthful. You have to remain honest on the processes that are taking place and the success that is happening. Looking at that data, owning that data, and finding a plan to remain gritty, so that you can start getting the solutions that you're desiring for your students and for your own professional practice as an educator, as you're moving forward and closing the achievement gap. So, with that said, guys, I appreciate you guys tuning in again, to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I am very thankful for each of you, and I hope that you can now understand a little bit better why grit matters and why you matter when it comes down to really implementing grit in the classroom and just in everyday life for students and for leaders. And so, with that said, I want to go ahead and continue with making my announcements. So, again, I do have a couple of events. I'll be seeing some of you guys sooner than later in North Dakota, at our NDCTM conference. And then I plan to grace you guys at the FCTM conference in about 2 weeks. We'll be there. And then we'll swing on over to Texas and camp at the Camps conference. I'm super excited. I can't wait to see you guys there. Then I'll be preparing for some other little projects throughout the nation, but then making plans to go to NCSM with you guys in September. NCTM, I'll be there to be at ICTM with you guys. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Also wanted to remind you that whenever you get a chance, check out my website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, and to schedule me for a speaking or coaching event, something in your district or something over the summer that you want to do, a PD, whatever. I'm here for you. Also, check out the new Grit Workbook Facebook clubs that I created for you guys. Thank you to those that have been in there. I know it is, since it's new, it's building, but I'm super excited about it. And I can't wait to see all of you guys that start really amplifying your voices within those groups and sharing testimonials as to how grit is working for you in your classrooms. Because I know that you've got some success stories. For those that have been using the framework, thank you. And you can feel free to share your success stories in those groups as well. And then I also wanted to remind you guys again that you can also the Grit Mini Workshop, which is going to be on the Grassroots Workshops website. Check that out. And then, of course, don't forget to check out all of the podcasts on the X Factor EDU network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph. This will be there as well. And it also does play on Spotify, so you can hear these episodes also on Spotify. So thank you so much, guys, again, for letting me share. I appreciate you tuning in again on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. And for those of you that are interested in being a guest, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email, india.white.123@gmail.com, so that we can get you scheduled. Thank you to those that have been reaching out and that have been wanting to be a part. I'm super excited about some of the episodes that are getting ready to come on. And but like I said, I'm here for you guys, and we're in this together. So don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out to me for any advice or any ideas, or if you just wanted to get together and collaborate, I'm here for you guys. So thanks again for tuning in to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. And until next time, stay gritty. See you guys.